Chapter 24. Tuesday morning. She awoke the next morning, Tuesday, her day to make an omelet. If Mac was coming over, she better shower and get dressed. It was already 8 o'clock. He might be here very soon. But then again, if he'd been working on that case yesterday into all hours of the night, he might have gone to bed very, very late. Still, she wouldn't take a chance, and after a quick shower, she dressed and walked downstairs. Once in the kitchen, she frowned, wondering whether she was supposed to call him about getting breakfast started or not. She really didn't want to. She brought out the video she'd made of Mac making the omelet and watched it again. Carefully. It hadn't taken him long, and he'd certainly done it nice and smoothly. She wondered if she could get on the prep work. She needed to learn to do this. Did that include having him here while she did it? There really wasn't a right or wrong decision here, but it felt like she was cheating without having him here for her to show off. Besides, she wasn't in too much of a hurry. She just didn't want to mess it up. She didn't understand her relationship with Mac, but considering the comments from the other cops, she figured there was already a lot of talk about them. It was hard not to wonder if that bothered Mac. For herself, she didn't care. He was a friend, and one she was proud to call a friend. Especially considering the craziness in her life. She disarmed the security on the front and back doors, snagged a cup of coffee, and called to the animals. "Come on. Let's go outside for a little bit, you guys. Get some fresh air and all that." With the back door propped open this beautiful morning, all the animals barreled out of the house with her. She chuckled at their antics because it was just too sweet. It was also chaotic, but hey, she'd take that. She walked down the steps to the backyard and wandered through the garden, looking to see what would come up. This was a mystery garden. Nan remembered a lot of the plants and where she had planted them. Doreen herself recognized a lot of the plants already coming up. But a lot of the annuals themselves were still just flowering and leafing out. The black-eyed Susans had yet to come up. There was echinacea as far as she could tell from the foliage, but until the purple flowers bloomed, she wasn't too sure. She hadn't seen very much of it before, but it looked to be something she would thoroughly enjoy. She walked back into the house almost an hour later. She checked her watch again as she walked over to the coffee pot and poured herself a second cup. "I can finish this pot myself," she said, "then put on another one when he comes, or I can leave him something from this pot. But if he doesn't come until 10 o'clock, then it'll be pretty nasty." "Do you always talk to yourself?" came a strange voice from behind her. A strange voice, and yet a not too strange voice. She turned ever so slowly to see Cecily, holding a snub-nosed revolver in her hand. Doreen took a deep breath. "Is that the gun you used to kill your sister and her boyfriend?" "You mean my boyfriend," she said. "At least some of the time." Doreen sagged against the counter. Oh crap. So she had been right. Wow. Poor Celeste. "Ha, see, you don't know jack shit," Cecily said. "And I don't understand that phrase. Why does anybody care about Jack's shit? That makes no sense. Is he some kind of monster pooper or something?" she asked in a droll tone. Her gaze was on the gun as her mind tried to spin a way out of this nightmare. "What the hell are you talking about?" Cecily asked. "Are you seriously mental?" "What does that mean?" "Seriously mental versus not being seriously mental?" she asked. "I'm confused. I really don't understand the question." The woman's face turned from being congenial to confused to pissed. "That's enough messing around. I don't need that kind of crap from you." "What do you need?" Doreen asked. "You break into my house, point a weapon at me. I don't have anything to do with you or your life. Why are you after me?" "Because you're the idiot screwing up my life. You and those animals of yours," she said. "You ruined me." "Why is it, whenever somebody is in the wrong, and they get found out, they turn around and blame everybody else. I didn't do anything to you, she said. None of this is my fault, and you're not dumping the blame on me. It is your fault, she said, and I will dump it on you because you had no business at the center. So it is your fault. If you weren't sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Considering I found your sister's body there, I would say I did have some business there, Doreen snapped. At least someone cared about what happened to your poor sister. What were you going to do? Just let her rot out there. I planned to call it in. But I didn't get a chance. I cared about her. But you didn't. You never even met her. Do I have to meet every woman who's been murdered to feel like she mattered? Doreen asked in astonishment. That makes no sense to me. But I guess for somebody who murdered her own sister, maybe that makes a twisted kind of sense to you? She wasn't your problem, and you didn't need to get involved. She wasn't a problem, Doreen snapped. She was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. And she was obviously very vibrant, very passionate. You took all that away from her. Oh, she was passionate, all right. Always about the goddamn wrong things. Somebody had to have a calm, collected, organized head, she snarled. I'm confused, Doreen said. What could you possibly have against your sister that was worth killing her for? How about the fact she was helping her boyfriend shut down my center? So Josh was her boyfriend after all, not your boyfriend? Doreen asked in confusion. She needed to keep Cecily talking, but it was kind of hard because Doreen was still figuring out how to get this woman to put down the gun. He was playing both of us, Cecily said with a sneer. I figured if my sister could see him for what he really was, she'd ditch him. So you seduced him to ruin their relationship? What kind of woman, much less a sister, are you? She couldn't imagine such a thing. Cecily said, What kind of woman are you? You don't even have to work. You just laze around, get in everybody's face, cause trouble and chaos everywhere you go. And this? This is what happens. You get into other people's business because you're bored. You need a man of your own, she sneered. If you would know what to do with one. I was married for 14 years, Doreen said coolly. So you'd think I'd know. Yeah, but you see the operative word there, Cecily said. Was. So if you knew how to do your job, you would still be married. Oh, okay. That's interesting, Doreen said, because for you, marriage is a job. I never considered it that way. So when you quit a job, that's what a divorce is to you then? She chuckled. That's an interesting take on marriage. I'm not sure it's all that complimentary to men, unless a divorce is them quitting their jobs too. Although I don't think you're really too bothered about the male point of view, are you? This is a stupid conversation, Cecily said. I came here to tie up loose ends and you're one of them. You don't have to tie up anything with me, Doreen said softly. You messed up and the law is all over you. There's no statute of limitations on murder. They'll find you whether you believe it or not, even if you leave town right now. They'll come after you and they'll get you. It might take 10 years, might take 20. You might even have 50 years on the run, if you're really lucky. But the fact of the matter is, you will spend all that time looking over your shoulder, and they'll still get you. So then it doesn't matter, she said. You've already killed 2 people, Doreen said with certainty. It's not like your sister's boyfriend killed her. You did. You killed her. Then you killed Josh and made it look like it was a murder-suicide. The woman just stared at her. How is it that you even figured that out? It's not like anybody was around as a witness. Nope, she said. But somebody heard. What are you talking about? You see. I heard 4 shots. 2, a little break, and then 2 more. And with that fact in mind, Doreen said, it's unlikely to be a murder-suicide. And that decrepit house. Why were they there? It hardly fit them. What are you talking about? Of course, it was a murder-suicide. 2 shots and 2 shots. As for the location, Josh had just bought the dump. He would flip it, he said. Likely story. And so not my sister's style. She never belonged in that place, not even for a minute, she said. 2 bullets apiece. What's wrong about that? He didn't have to kill himself at the time. He probably fired 2 warning shots, then fired 2 more that killed her. Who knows what was going through his mind at the time? Except forensics didn't find any other bullet holes. At least she hadn't heard from Mac that they had. She knew Cecily had killed them both, but getting her to admit it would be hard, or maybe not. Smoothly, Doreen slipped the conversation back to Cecily's actions. If you had left them where they had dropped, then no one would have been the wiser. But for whatever reason, after killing them both, you felt the need to move your sister's body. Cecily glared at Doreen for a long moment, then gave a nonchalant shrug. I had to bring her back to where it all started, she said slowly. It's also what Josh would have done if he'd killed her. To make a point. And to bring her home. 2 motives blended together. And I had to make it look like she'd died by his hand. Sure. Doreen nodded slowly, grateful Cecily had admitted her actions, but worried that she had, because she obviously didn't see Doreen as a threat. And planned to make sure she wasn't alive to tell any tales. She heard the front door open quietly. As long as Cecily didn't, it was all good. Doreen could hope it was Mac, but she didn't know if Cecily worked alone. That's why so much blood was on the papers and the material. The material was your clothes, right? I guess your sister wasn't easy to move. No, she wasn't. I've always been strong and way bigger than she was, so I figured I could do it a whole lot easier than I did. I almost dropped her and ended up grabbing her by the neck at the garden, she said. Afterward, I didn't even think about it. I just changed and put the bloody clothes in the garbage. But you forgot there wasn't a weekend pickup, Doreen said. I missed Friday's pickup, she said. And therefore the bloody clothes were still in the garbage. Do you always go snooping in other people's garbage? Cecily asked in outrage. I was being a good citizen, Doreen said with a wave of her hand. The gun lifted again. Easy. I'm just explaining what I did. I went there to pay my respects to your sister, and Muggs had to take a poop. When Muggs takes a poop, Muggs takes a royal poop. I had doggy bags with me. I cleaned it up, but I didn't want to take the doggy bag to my car, so I took it to the garbage can. As soon as I opened the lid, all I could see were the bloody papers. And if you know anything about blood, she said quietly, you know that was a lot of blood. That was way more than a bloody nose could have made. It was way more than a small cut would produce. That was some serious blood. As in, that was blood likely from your sister, who died in the derelict house. Did you even say goodbye to her? Or did you let your sister just lie in that house and bleed out while you laughed? I said goodbye, Cecily said. Do you think I wanted to do it? Of course I didn't want to. She's the only relative I had. Oh, I'm really glad to hear that, Doreen said. The woman stared at her in surprise. What? That my sister is my only relative? Yes, because, if you still had a mother around, she'd already be suffering because of the loss of one of her daughters. And then she'd get another blow when she found out her second daughter had killed the first, and now she'll lose the second one as well. I'm the older one, Cecily snapped. I'm the first daughter. Doreen gave a slow nod. Okay, whatever works for you. And I'm not going to prison, she said. If you had just come in and shot me dead, then left, I would have more faith in that statement. Why, she said. I had to know how you figured it out. It wasn't all that hard. Think about it. You messed up on the garbage can. Doreen snorted, not sure why she was pricking the woman's temper. Besides, now that you do know, you still haven't pulled the trigger. I'm getting ready to, Cecily growled. But I need any cash you have. Cash? Doreen laughed. I don't have any. None at all. But you have to. You don't have a job. You live in this house all by yourself. And, according to the rumors, you have antiques. So stop with the games and give me all the cash you have. Doreen leaned forward. You heard about the antiques? Cecily waved the gun. What are you, an idiot? The minute you do anything in this town, of course everyone finds out. Doreen watched the gun. Time was running out. And Cecily would be even more pissed when Doreen didn't give up any cash. She thought she'd heard the door, thought she'd heard Mac enter, but saw no sign of him. Just then, Thaddeus, who'd been on the kitchen counter, hopped onto the table and preened. Cecily looked at the bird in disgust. How can you live with that thing? It just shits everywhere. He's pretty decently trained, Doreen said cheerfully. He has a couple places he uses for bathroom breaks, but, other than that, he just shits on selective people. He shits on people? She stepped back. He does have a bit of an attitude. And he likes to shit on people with shitty attitudes too, Doreen said, giggling. She didn't know how long she could keep this up. Her gaze was ever watchful, looking for her chance. But Cecily was just too far away. If Doreen tried to kick the gun out of her hand, she'd likely get shot in the process. But just then, Thaddeus hopped up onto Cecily's shoulder. She shrieked. Get it off of me. Get it off of me. I wouldn't worry about it, Doreen said. He hasn't had a dump this morning. He's probably looking for the perfect spot. She shrieked all the louder and hit the bird hard with her hand. Thaddeus let out a cry as he tumbled off her shoulder onto the floor. Because he couldn't fly well, it was much harder for him to break his fall. But as soon as he hit the floor, Goliath climbed up Cecily's thigh, howling in outrage. Muggs barked, twisting between her legs. She was in high heels, which just completely blew Doreen away, because high heels were one of those torture instruments that she tolerated for a few hours in the evening. But during the day? Hell no. At least not now that her soon-to-be ex-husband wasn't here, forcing her to wear them. She watched in fascination as Muggs tripped up Cecily at feet level, and Goliath tried to claw up her legs to her waist, digging in his claws for gripping purposes, and he was no lightweight. Cecily shrieked as if under attack. When Mac snagged the gun from her hand, Cecily didn't even notice. She screeched and hit out at Goliath, kicking poor Muggs. But Goliath had a beautiful response. As a hand came toward him, he reached up and clamped down tight on her finger. Her shrieks turned to sobs of pain, and Muggs gave her one hard swat of his butt, then jumped up, placing both thick paws on the back of her knees. She went down, falling forward, collapsing hard on the floor, crying out in pain. With Mac holding the gun on Cecily, Doreen tried to calm down Goliath. Hey, Goliath. It's okay, honey. Take it easy. She didn't hurt Thaddeus. She glanced over at Thaddeus, hoping that was true. Thaddeus ruffled his feathers, sitting on top of the table, looking down at the woman who had sent him flying, as if she deserved everything his friends had inflicted on her. Finally, with a lot of pressure on his jaw, Doreen forced Goliath to release his grip on Cecily's finger. Cecily held her hand against her chest, crying as if her heart was broken, or maybe her finger. Doreen figured probably both were possible. At some point it would hit Cecily that she'd killed her own sister. It was one thing to do that in a rage, but it was another thing to do it out of spite. Eventually, the reality had to set in that Cecily was now alone in the world. And her future was not looking too bright. Doreen reached up to high-five Mac. When their hands clapped and disengaged, he said, "You know what? My instincts told me not to knock." Figures you'd get into trouble, even early on a Tuesday. Apparently no day is safe with you. She beamed up at him. See? That's all due to the animals. They were probably sending you ESP messages. He glared at her. She chuckled. Just kidding. I figured you were hungry. He pointed down at Cecily. I can't believe she killed them both. Were you listening that long? She asked. He held up his phone. And I learned from you. I recorded the entire thing. At that, Cecily burst into more tears and curled up on the floor in a fetal position. You better call a cruiser to come and get your prisoner, Doreen said. I think we just cuffed a double murderer. He looked at her and smiled. Thanks for that. Thanks for coming to the rescue, she said. I'm happy to solve your cases as long as you keep saving my poor sad ass in the process. At that, he burst out laughing. It's a deal.